I'd never believed in ghosts until I started hearing her humming in the house again. It wasn't eerie. It was soft. The kind of sound that used to float from the kitchen when she cooked Sunday breakfast in her oversized pajama shirt, swaying barefoot on cold tile floors, the scent of maple syrup drifting with her voice. But now it came when the house was quiet, when it was just me and the hollow echoes of everything they took. Her name was Elise, my wife, the woman who didn't just light up a room, she warmed it. She had a gift for noticing people, the kind of person who would remember the barista's name and their favorite band after one chat. She wasn't made for cruelty. She didn't know how to hate. That was her weakness, maybe, because they knew how to hate. And they hated her for being beautiful without effort, for being smart without arrogance, for being kind without motive. It started with small things. Rumors at the university where she taught creative writing, whispers in the break room about her having an affair with a student, a lie born from the bitterness of another lecturer, Marcy Dillon, who had been passed over for a promotion Elise earned. Elise laughed it off at first. Then the notes began showing up in her mailbox. Then our home was egged. Then someone spray-painted "whore" on our garage. The faculty did nothing. The students, half of them enthralled and the other half amused, treated her like a scandal to follow. One night I came home and found her sitting on the kitchen floor, glass of wine in hand, tears in her eyes, saying over and over, "I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything." But lies stick, and truth peels off under pressure. Then came the media student, Jeremy Fallon, a smug little parasite with a podcast that mocked campus events. He ran a segment about Elise, called her tenure trash, and invited a panel to speculate about her alleged sex life. They laughed like hyenas circling a wounded deer. After that, she barely left the house. I watched her shrink day by day, like someone dying from the inside. I tried to reach her, but she was retreating into a place I couldn't follow. Our bedroom became her bunker. Her smiles disappeared like photographs left in sunlight. She stopped writing, she stopped sleeping. And then one night, she walked out while I was in the shower. No note, no call, just the sound of brakes and screams. She stepped into traffic on East Laurel Avenue, and when I got to the scene, her body was already covered. That was 3 days before our 5th anniversary. Her funeral was held in the university chapel, clean, sterile, as if her life could be compressed into a polite 45-minute service. I gave a eulogy I don't remember. What I do remember is looking up and seeing them. Marcy Dillon with her fake tear-streaked mascara, whispering to Dr. John Ricks, the head of her department, and chuckling behind a trembling tissue. Jeremy Fallon leaned against a wall, sunglasses on indoors, smirking like he was at a premiere. I heard the word fragile. I heard overreacted. I heard mental health. And that's when I stopped crying. That's when I started planning. A week later, I sat in the courtroom and watched Jeremy Fallon walk free. The district attorney said there was no law against what he did, that his podcast was satire, that Elise had no documented complaints filed, that her suicide was tragic but not criminal. Jeremy's lawyer even thanked the court for supporting freedom of speech. And the judge nodded, clenched my fists until blood ran from the lines of my palms, and as Jeremy walked past me, he glanced down and smirked. That night, I burned everything Elise ever owned that reminded me of peace. Her candles, her soft cardigans, her favorite mugs. I left one photo of her on my nightstand, the one where she was laughing in a summer dress under a string of lights in our backyard. That smile was now a promise, a demand. This wasn't grief, this was focus. And I would not stop until I broke every single one of them. The first to go was Marcy Dillon, not physically, not yet. I wanted them to feel it first, that slither of dread when you know something's coming but don't know when. I started with letters, not threatening, just enough to unsettle. Quotes from Elise's abandoned journals slipped into her mailbox, into her office drawer, under her windshield wipers, lines about betrayal, about masks, about how smiling can hurt more than crying. Then came the phone calls, always at 2:16 a.m., the exact time Elise died. No words, just silence. Marcy started leaving work early. She looked over her shoulder in grocery stores, and one night I followed her to the gas station, wearing the same red scarf Elise had loved. I made sure she saw me in the rearview mirror, just once. That was enough. Within a week, she filed a police report claiming someone was stalking her. It got dismissed. The police had more important things to do. Next was Dr. John Ricks, a pompous, self-important snake who covered for Marcy more than once and dismissed Elise's concerns about the rumors as interpersonal workplace dynamics. I knew his pattern. He visited a hotel every Thursday, room 204. Same woman every time, not his wife. I took photos, sent them anonymously to the university's ethics board, then to his wife, then to his teenage daughter's Instagram inbox. The university put him on leave. His family locked him out of the house. He tried to blame it on a disgruntled student. And then there was Jeremy. I saved him for last. Because for Jeremy, humiliation would not be enough. Fear would not be enough. He had to be dismantled. So I started with his fame. His podcast had grown since Elise died. Campus Clowns had sponsors now, ads, merchandise. He wore a leather jacket and smiled like someone who thought he'd won. I leaked an old audio file, a recording of him mocking a sexual assault survivor during a private conversation. It spread like wildfire. His sponsors pulled out, his followers started to question, but it wasn't enough. He still lived, still breathed, still smirked. So I waited, watched. I learned his routines, his habits, where he parked, what time he ran, who he slept with. I learned everything. And then I planned the night. The woods behind the old stadium were quiet, remote. I left a note in his mailbox with nothing but Elise's name and the address. He came, of course. Driven by arrogance or fear, I don't know. But he came. And I was waiting. Jeremy didn't even knock. He pulled up in his matte black sedan with a headlight still cracked from a night he bragged about driving drunk on a live stream. He stepped out like he was walking into a confrontation he already believed he'd win. The kind of man who thought the world owed him its silence, and women owed him their bodies. I watched from the tree line, quiet as breath, the chill settling around us like a shroud. He wore cologne, a lot of it. Like he was meeting someone he needed to impress. Maybe he thought Elise had family. Maybe he thought it was a setup to record him apologizing, or worse, another scandal to monetize. I waited until he passed the second tree with the red strip of cloth, a signal I'd marked days ago to know when he was far enough in. Then I stepped out behind him. He didn't hear me at first, but I knew the exact moment he sensed something was off. He stopped, looked around, called out, "Hello?" My silence said more than words could. He turned and saw me, just a man in a dark coat, standing still, holding a small item in my gloved hand. Elise's scarf. "What is this?" he asked, stepping back. I said nothing. I didn't have to. "I got nothing to say to some psycho widow," he added, his voice cracked. I took one slow step forward. That's when the bravado cracked. Just a fracture, but enough. He started backing away, turned to run, but I had already spread the ground with fishing line tied between trees. He went down hard, face first into the cold mud. He tried to scramble up, spitting blood and leaves, but by the time he turned, I was there. And the taser hit him clean. He twitched and fell flat, but beneath the thick layers of ice. I didn't kill him that night. No. That would have been too kind. Instead, I loaded him into the back of a van lined with soundproof padding, just like I'd built in the garage. I didn't take him home. I took him to the safe house I'd been restoring for months. An abandoned hunting cabin off an old forestry road no one drove down anymore. There, in the belly of winter, surrounded by snow and silence, I let Jeremy meet the ghost he helped create. The room was dark, just a single bulb hanging above. No windows, no clock. Time was mine. The first thing he saw when he woke was Elise's photo on the wall. He screamed for hours. I didn't speak. I just played the sound of his podcast, the episodes where he laughed about Elise, where he invited guests to joke about her suicide, where he called her the poster child for snowflake syndrome. I let it loop on a speaker while I watched through the camera feed in the next room. I didn't starve him. I didn't torture him physically, not at first. I let his own voice unravel him. Day 3, he started talking to himself. Day 5, he asked me to kill him. I waited until day 7. Then I opened the door, sat in front of him, and laid out a single piece of paper. A confession. Worded exactly right. Not just about Elise, but about what he'd done to 2 other women who had reported him privately and were dismissed. One of them had attempted suicide in 2021. His eyes darted across the words. "You'll never get away with this," he said. I slid a thumb drive across the floor. It contained videos, audio, screenshots, enough to ruin the echo chamber he had built. "You've got 2 choices," I said. He spat at me. So I pulled the knife from my belt and let him see the initials carved into the handle, E.H. Then I reminded him of what Elise wrote in her final entry. The one no one ever found but me. Pain doesn't kill you, indifference does. He signed. The next morning, I dropped the confession, drive, and phone at the police station's mailbox. Anonymous. Jeremy Fallon was found 2 days later, naked and sobbing on the shoulder of Route 4. He was arrested for trespassing and suspected drug use. He claimed he was kidnapped. No one believed him. Because everything I did to him sounded exactly like the delusions of a guilty mind. Marcy Dillon lost her job after a student finally stepped forward about her history of intimidation. Dr. Ricks attempted suicide in his motel room. Survived, paralyzed from the waist down. But it wasn't over. Because they weren't alone. But there was one more name on the list. Someone who never stood in front of a camera, who never posted a meme, but who let it all happen. Dean Curtis Bell. The man who denied Elise's request for a transfer. The man who laughed in her face when she begged to be moved from Marcy's department. The man who funded Jeremy's satire podcast as part of a campus engagement program. He was the root, and roots rot from poison. So I poisoned him in the slowest, most methodical way I could. Every month, I mailed an anonymous letter to the local news outlets accusing him of embezzlement, discrimination, and silencing harassment claims. Each claim backed with just enough truth to prompt whispers. Protests started appearing on campus. Students demanded transparency. His office was vandalized. He received death threats. He blamed everyone, accused faculty of sabotage. Then one day, he got an envelope at his home. Inside was a single photograph. Elise in her office, the last time she smiled before it all began. On the back, I wrote, "She asked for help, you laughed." 3 days later, Curtis Bell resigned. But resignation wasn't justice. It was time he felt the silence, the kind Elise drowned in. So I broke into his lake house that night. I didn't touch him. I just stood at the foot of his bed until he woke up. The terror in his eyes told me everything I needed. I whispered one sentence. "She forgave you, I won't." And then I left. I knew he wouldn't sleep again. The hunt had started with fury. It ended in precision, in silence, in the same quiet Elise was buried under. But there's still one more chapter. Still one thing left to do. People think revenge ends when the targets fall. They're wrong. It ends when the echoes stop, when the laughter dies in people's throats, when every smirk turns into a flinch. That's when you know the storm has passed. But mine hadn't. Not yet. Because even after Jeremy disappeared from the public eye, after Marcy vanished into quiet irrelevance, after Curtis Bell quit and locked himself behind iron gates and private security, the rot lingered. In the building where Elise once taught, in the classroom where they whispered, in the emails that never got answered, The institution was still standing, unbothered. The university put out a statement about Elise 8 months too late. It called her a brilliant and cherished member of the faculty. No apology, no acknowledgement of the rumors, the podcasts, the inaction, just a bland paragraph for damage control. And then they held a campus vigil, the same campus that let her die. Not because I wanted to mourn, because I needed them to see the truth standing among them, not buried beneath their lies. The lawn was filled with candles and students taking selfies beside a framed photo of Elise, the one stolen from the department's wall. A professor read a poem, someone cried into their sleeve. But none of them knew her. None of them were there when she begged to be believed. I didn't speak, I just walked to the center, lit a match, and dropped it onto the fake bouquet beneath her photo. Gasoline burns quick. The display ignited in a snap, sending flames crawling up the wood frame. People screamed, ran. I didn't move. They called the police. They didn't realize who I was until they saw the photo Elise had taken of me on our honeymoon, the one I had left in the ashes, smiling, alive, whole. They called it arson. I called it cleansing. They didn't arrest me that night. Too chaotic. Too many witnesses saying too many different things. But I knew it was only a matter of time. So I made the final move. I gathered every file, every recording, every letter. I put them all in a box labeled Elise's Truth. Then I mailed it to 3 reporters I trusted. Not big names, just people who had written about real things and who never stopped digging. Then I disappeared. No headlines, no press conference, no message. I just drove. I drove until the roads had no names, until I found a cabin where no one asked questions, and the wind sounded like Elise's laugh before all of this began. I lived there for 6 weeks, and in that silence, something changed. Not forgiveness, not healing, but stillness. I'd watched the world burn from a distance. Jeremy's confession went viral. Marcy's past caught up with her in waves. Rick's became a warning story. The university launched an internal investigation. Donors pulled funding. And Elise became real again. Not a rumor, not a joke. A woman. A name spoken with reverence, not ridicule. I should have felt peace, but I didn't, because there was one final thread. The driver. No one had ever blamed him. The man who hit Elise said it was an accident. No drugs, no alcohol, just wrong place, wrong time. But I looked into him. His name was Frank Corman, retired cop, 6 prior complaints of excessive force, 2 internal investigations, 1 sealed file about an incident involving a young woman and coercion. The department had protected him. He lived in a quiet neighborhood. 2 kids, a wife who looked like a shadow. I watched him for days. And on the 8th day, I left a note under his windshield. You saw her. You could have stopped. He didn't report it. 2 days later, another note. You hit her like she was nothing. You looked away like it didn't matter. Still nothing. And then I called. I said nothing. Just played the audio of the witness who said Elise stood in the street crying for 2 minutes before she stepped out. Frank hung up. He called the police. They traced nothing. He stopped leaving the house, installed cameras, boarded windows. I waited, and on the 10th night I walked up to his door. He opened it with a gun in his hand. But I wasn't there to kill him. I was there to show him the footage. A dash cam clip from a car behind his, the one the department buried. It showed Elise in the street, clearly lit by headlights, standing still, not running, and it showed him speeding up, not braking. He watched the clip, said nothing, then vomited into the bushes. I leaned close. Live with it, I said, the way I did. Then I walked away. I never heard from him again. But the house went up for sale 2 weeks later. No forwarding address. No funeral this time, just the quiet vanishing of one more coward. And then it was over. All of them, broken or buried. All of them silenced. But Elise, she was finally heard. The first real sleep I had in over a year came on a night with no electricity. The cabin's generator had died. I lit 3 candles and waited for the wind to die down. Curled in the thick old quilt Elise's mother had made for us the Christmas before she passed. Outside, snow hissed against the windows. Inside, there was no sound but the occasional creak of settling wood and the slow beat of my own pulse. That night, I dreamed of Elise. Not her death, not her last days, but the version of her I had nearly forgotten, the woman who ran barefoot through the rain to catch fireflies, who dragged me to poetry readings and open mic nights, laughing at all the wrong moments just to see if she could make me laugh too. The woman who once whispered, "You know what I love about you? You make me feel like the world doesn't matter." She was standing by a lake in my dream, barefoot, hair wild in the wind, smiling. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. When I woke, I didn't cry. I just sat for a long time, staring at the snow piled high outside the cabin door, letting the silence settle deep into my bones. It was done. Every name on my list was crossed off. Every lie had been pulled into the light. But I wasn't the same man Elise married. I wasn't even a man anymore, not really. Just a vessel for grief and justice and something colder, harder. I had become what they made her feel, merciless and quiet and alone. And that was the cost. You don't get to walk through hell and come back clean. A week later, I turned myself in. Not for them, not for redemption, but because I knew how this story had to end. I didn't confess everything, only enough. Arson, harassment, a few counts of illegal surveillance. The confession I'd forced Jeremy to sign, I'd told them it was coerced. He refused to testify, probably still afraid I'd come back. They charged me with what they could prove. I pled guilty. No trial, no media circus, just a quiet sentencing in a gray courtroom where no one smiled and no one laughed. 7 years, minimum 5 with good behavior. The judge looked at me like she didn't know whether to pity or fear me. I didn't care. They gave me a small cell with a narrow window that let in about 20 minutes of sunlight every afternoon. I took a job in the library, read every book Elise had loved, started writing again. Letters I never sent, notes I left inside donated books for someone else to find one day. In the prison yard, they called me Professor. I didn't correct them. Outside, the world moved on, but Elise's name didn't disappear, and they renamed the writing center after her. A scholarship was started in her honor. A group of students formed a nonprofit for victims of academic harassment and bullying. The university tried to wipe its hands clean, but the stain stayed. She was no longer just the woman who died. She was the woman who mattered, who has remembered. I was released after 5 years and 3 months. No parade, no one waiting, just a man with half-clad hair, a satchel of letters and a single box of things, Elise's scarf, the photo of her laughing, and a map with one red circle. The place she always wanted to visit but never got to, Wyoming, the Tetons. So that's where I went. I bought a used truck and drove without music, letting the wind and road speak for her. When I arrived, I found a quiet hill overlooking a field of wildflowers and a glacial stream. I spread her ashes there, no words, no ceremony, just me and the sky and the memory of her humming on Sunday mornings. I placed the photo on a flat stone. "Here," I said, "this matters." And then I walked away. I didn't look back. Because some ghosts don't need haunting. They just need to rest. And some widows don't grieve forever. They carry fire until the night is warm again.